More than 40,000 dead, majority women and children, more devastation than Dresden, Hamburg, and London combined. Brutal siege, which has led to dozens of starvation deaths and an entire population on the brink of famine. An all-out assault that has left nothing sacred, from schools to mosques to hospitals, cemeteries, and refugee camps. There's no world in which these atrocities committed by Israel and Gaza are justifiable, let alone righteous. But according to the Israeli government and our own, they are acceptable, to be celebrated even, because they've been committed in service of a noble war aim, eliminating Hamas. That's the logic that the Israeli public and a decent portion of our own has bought. Yes, the civilian deaths are bad, but it's a price we must accept in order to get the Hamas bad guys. But a new analysis in Foreign Affairs by political scientist and international security expert Robert Pape reveals that not only has Israel's genocide in Gaza been morally outrageous, it has actually strengthened Hamas. Israel isn't just falling short in their war objectives, they have bolstered the very group they are supposedly seeking to destroy. They have murdered countless civilians in service of making Hamas vastly stronger. Incredible, but also, let's be honest, predictable. Turns out death and destruction are not the same as victory. So here is Pape in that article headlined, "Hamas is winning." Quote, "The central flaw in Israel's strategy is not a failure of tactics or the imposition of constraints on military force, just as the failure of the US's military strategy in Vietnam had little to do with the technical proficiency of its troops or political and moral limits on the uses of military power. Rather, the overarching failure has been a gross misunderstanding of the sources of Hamas's power. To its great detriment, Israel has failed to realize that the carnage and devastation it has unleashed in Gaza has only made its enemy stronger." So essentially, Israel and the US have focused on how many Hamas fighters have been killed as a measure of the success of the war. That is entirely the wrong metric. It almost doesn't matter how many fighters Hamas has today. What matters is its recruitment potential for the future. How many new recruits can they pull from the next generation? Media reports and local polling suggest that number has surged massively. Here's the Jerusalem Post. Reportedly, Hamas is already looking to capitalize on this IDF-enabled surge in popularity. Now, this is a right-wing outlet, so you've got to sort through the propaganda about quote-unquote Gaza youths, which appears to be an attempt to legitimize killing children, and their credulous acceptance of Israeli lies about how many Hamas fighters they've actually killed. But the basics of the reporting are that Hamas is holding recruitment camps and training sessions to replace the fighters they've lost to death, injury, and arrest. They claim that Hamas is looking to add some 20,000 new members to their ranks. But even this biased outlet has a pretty straightforward accounting of the risk landscape potential Hamas recruits face. Quote, 18-year-olds choosing whether to join Hamas or not, on the one hand, face the reality that so many who have joined Hamas have been beaten and killed by the IDF. On the other hand, they currently have no horizon for finding work or doing much of anything other than sitting around in refugee camps, since no one has even started planning the rebuilding Gaza process, which is likely to take many years. What they don't note is that those 18-year-olds face potential death and torture by the IDF whether or not they join Hamas, since the Israeli government has so indiscriminately slaughtered civilians and has operated under a presumption that all men and boys are to be assumed Hamas. Now, going back to Pape, Israel's actions have created ripe conditions for Hamas propaganda, according to him, which has been received favorably by many Palestinians. He points out that polls have found Hamas support and support for violence against Israeli civilians both surging after October 7th. In addition, Israeli atrocities have fueled what he describes as a, quote, cult of martyrdom, increasing the allure of Hamas membership. Quote, people are less likely to volunteer for high-risk missions if their sacrifices go unnoticed. A community that honors the fallen fighters of a terrorist group helps sustain it. Martyrdom legitimizes terrorist actions and encourages new recruits. Terrorists will act as they see fit, but it is the community that ultimately decides where an individual's sacrifice is accorded high status or whether it is broadly viewed as irrational, criminal, and worthy of contempt. The community support for Hamas has also directly hindered the IDF's ability to successfully target Hamas leadership and locate hostages to additional supposed war aims. After all, what Palestinian with a shred of integrity would collaborate with the genocidal IDF? Yep, turns out indiscriminately murdering civilians while blocking peaceful pathways to a negotiated settlement is a great way to surge support for violent resistance. If you create massive amounts of grief, despair, and rage and block all nonviolent political processes, don't be surprised when that rage finds an expression in violence. In the words of security analyst Internet Hippo, quote, I'm not a political expert, but if you eliminated Hamas but killed my whole family in the process, my first move would be to start Hamas 2.0. The truth is, just as we would have been better off if we had done literally nothing in response to 9/11, Israel would have been better off if they had done literally nothing in response to October 7th. Now, that's to say nothing, of course, of the Iraqi innocents and Palestinian innocents who were sacrificed on the altar of personal political interests masquerading as counterterror. For my part, I've got enough respect for Bibi to reject the notion that he was too dumb to operate at the intellectual level of internet hippo. They knew their campaign wasn't going to eliminate Hamas, but in a sixth sense, strengthening Hamas actually serves Bibi's political interests. After all, he has consistently worked to bolster Hamas in order to block a potential peace deal and to maintain division between Gaza and the West Bank. I don't see why that logic would be any different today. So long as Hamas remains, the IDF has endless justification for raids, bombings, and occupation, endlessly prolonging a war that Bibi wants to be endlessly prolonged. He can proclaim to credulous international leaders that they have no partner for peace, even as he makes it clear he has absolutely no interest in a two-state solution or any other long-term peace. The brutality of that annihilation campaign can satiate the post-October 7th bloodlust from the Israeli public and begin to rebuild Netanyahu's political standing. That's been working, all while accomplishing Bibi's stated goal of, quote, thinning out the Gaza population, which is the constant ethno-state imperative. After all, if the whole logic of your state is that it must be controlled by a Jewish majority, then the very existence of non-Jewish children is a looming threat to the entire national project. Eliminating Hamas is a convenient pretext for neutralizing that demographic threat through the mass slaughter of Palestinian children and mothers in particular. Now, in Gaza, Bibi and the IDF have seemingly destroyed everything but Hamas, and that may well have been the point. It's a great piece from Robert Pape. I know you took a look at it as well. He talks about, the body count figures in terms of the number of Hamas fighters they've killed are very disputed. The Israelis say somewhere around 15,000. U.S. intelligence says 10,000. Hamas says more like 5,000 to 6,000. In any case, the amount of support for Hamas has been predictably dramatically surged. There has not been, they were betting, or there was some analysis of like, oh, if we, make this really horrible for them, people will turn on Hamas. The opposite has happened. There's been a rally around the flag effect. Again, very predictable and very consistent with what we've seen historically in terms of bombed and besieged civilian populations. And so in spite of the technological military vast superiority, in terms of the actual stated war aims, it's been a total and complete failure on every level.
Yeah, I keep coming back to North Vietnam, and I really recommend people need to go and read Robert Pape. He is incredibly smart. He's a scholar. He's a long-studied air power, civilian populations, World War II. I've read about his stuff for a long time, and since the October 7th conflict, he's been doing amazing work. This is a very well-reasoned piece. There's nothing emotional within it. It's just pointing to data. You're looking and you're pointing together the recruitment numbers, and look, if bombs could solve things, then we would have won the Vietnam War. If bombs could solve things, we would have won the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. Guess what happened in every single case is that it was counterproductive, usually, unless it was for a direct military purpose. And in the long run, they outlasted us and they won. I think in the same case, they have the will. They have the ability to stay forever and to operate in the shadows and to now fundraise and recruit for the people who have been victimized as a result of the policy. All they have to do is survive. Yeah. Israel is warring against a quote unquote ideology. Good luck. I've seen people try it before. They always lose.
It's not just that they're not defeated. It's that they actively our operations in Iraq and the attacks on civilians led to a surge in popularity for Iraqi resistance groups and helped to create ISIS. Our operations in Afghanistan led to a surge. The Taliban was down to almost nothing. And they were able to rebuild and be such a formidable force that they just immediately take back over when we leave, because our occupation and our atrocities provided the moral justification and surged the support for these groups. So our actions, and now it's obviously what's happening with Israel and Gaza, have actually surged support for that group. Again, it's entirely predictable. This is something that we've been saying from the beginning. We highlighted those Jocko comments from the beginning of this is not the way you go. If you are actually serious about taking out Hamas leadership, getting the hostages back, you have to win over the population. You need them to collaborate with you. You need to provide them a different path that isn't Hamas. None of that was done. And I don't think it's because they just didn't understand and they were stupid and foolish. I think it's because the goal was never really eliminate Hamas, especially from Bibi's perspective. Again, he's always supported Hamas. I think he still finds Hamas to be very useful there because it gives him the pretext to do whatever the hell he wants, prolong the war as long as he wants, be as brutal as he wants, maintain his position of power, continue to block a two-state solution by saying there's no partner for peace. All that logic still remains. So I can't be so naive as to think that he doesn't also understand what's going on here and how the idea of eliminating Hamas was always doomed to fail from the jump.
Absolutely. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.